Hello everyone, I am Bisonga together with Miss Gelacio and Miss Rosialda. Today, we will discuss the Assure model. And this is the content of our discussion. What is Assure model? And who developed this model? And the 6 steps of Assure model. So first, let's define what is Assure model. The Assure model is an instructional system or guideline that teachers can use to develop lesson plans which integrate the use of technology and media according to Samaldino, Lothar, and Russell 2008. It is a well-known instructional design guide that uses the constructivist perspective which integrate multimedia and technology to enhance the learning environment according to Lefebvre 2006. The peculiar feature of this model is that focus on planning and conducting instruction that incorporates media according to Heinrich, Molenda, and Russell 1993. From those different people, they only mean one thing, that Assure model is a procedural guide for planning and conducting instruction that incorporates media and technology. Its main perspective is on how to integrate the media, any kind of media. So with the use of any media and teaching capable of producing the desired learning outcomes to help the student learn and acquire the knowledge or skills they are needed at the end of the lesson. This ISD or instructional system design process that was modified to be used by teachers in the regular classroom. The ISD process is one in which teachers and trainers can use to design and develop the most appropriate learning environment for their students or audience. Teachers prepare the Assure model because it is designated to be used for a few hours of instruction and for each individual student. This model does not require high complexity of delivered media, deep ID knowledge, or high revision of designs. The main difference between the inexperienced teacher and an expert teacher is that an expert teacher can easily decide on content, appropriate teaching strategies, and delivery medium. The Assure model gives new and experienced teachers general roadmap to follow to help them think more like expert teacher.
Who developed the Assure model? Well, it was developed by Robert Heinrich and Michael Molanda 1999. It is well-known instructional design guide using constructivist perspective which integrates multimedia and technology to enhance the learning environment according to Patrick Lefebvre 2006.
The Assure model is an enriched evolution of ADDIE general model. The difference between the ADDIE and the Assure model: ADDIE has 5 steps which are analysis, design, develop, implement, and evaluate, while Assure model has 6 steps which are analyze learners, state standards and objectives, select methods and media, utilize media and technology, require learner participation, evaluate, and revise. Although the Assure model has 6 steps which do not exactly correspond to ADDIE's 5 steps, Assure also presents design phases and shares with it the 2 main features: the initial focus on analysis and the cyclic structure. Like what I've said a while ago, Assure model has 6 steps, each represented by a letter in the acronym title, with each step describing a set of tasks central to the informed selection and use of educational technology. So, the Assure model acronym stands for these important components. Letter A, analyze learners. S, state objectives. Second, as select methods, media, and materials. U, utilize methods, media, and materials. R, require learners' participation. And the letter E, evaluate and revise. Now, I will discuss the first and second step of Assure model. So first, analyze learners. So the first step in the Assure model is to analyze learners. To analyze the learners, you must examine the learners in details. Like most things, without taking the time in the beginning to examine the learner, nothing you have prepared will be effective. So that's why it is important to analyze the learners first to become effective of your teaching. As a part of your analyzing your learners, you must identify them. Your audience can be students, teachers, group members, an organization, a youth group, among many others. You must know the audience if you are to select the best medium to meet the objectives you have set. The audience can be analyzed in the terms of their general characteristic, specific entry competencies, and learning style and preferences. First is the general characteristic includes the grade level, age, sex, race, ethnicity, status, income, employment, mental, emotional, physical, or social problems, or socioeconomic status. So, a superficial analysis of learner characteristic can provide helpful leads in selecting instructional methods and media. Characteristics of the learners depend on their reading skills, ethnic or cultural subgroup, learners' apathy, social background, and etc. So, this information gathered will help you in the decision that you make with respect to other steps in the process. When you determine the character of the learners, it will guide you in choosing specific strategies and resources to aid the learning process. Next will be the specific entry competencies. Know what your learner is capable of doing. At the beginning, you have to assume that the learners lack the knowledge and skills, but they possess the knowledge or skills needed to learn and understand from the lesson. This assumption that learners have the prerequisite knowledge or skill to begin the lesson can seldom be accepted casually in school settings. Teachers of mixed ability class routinely anticipate that some students will need remedial help before they are ready to begin a particular unit of instruction. So, this realization suggests that instructors must verify assumptions about entry competencies through informal means such as in class questioning or out of class interviews, or more formal means such as testing with standardized or teacher-made tests. Entry tests are assessment, both formal and informal, that determine whether the students possess the prerequisites. Third is the learning styles and preferences. Learning styles refers to a cluster of psychological traits that determine how an individual perceives, interacts with, and responds emotionally to learning environments. Gardner says not all the people have the same abilities, not all the people learn in the same way. Gardner was dissatisfied with the concept of IQ and its unitary view of intelligence. He identified 7 aspects of intelligence. So first is the verbal linguistic, second, logical mathematical, third, visual spatial, fourth, musical and rhythmic, fifth, bodily kinesthetic, six, interpersonal, and 7, intrapersonal, ability to understand oneself. Learning styles variables discussed in the literature can be categorized as perceptual preferences and strengths, information processing habits, motivational factors, and psychological factors. So, first, the perceptual preferences and strengths. Learners vary as to which sensory gateways they prefer using and which they are especially adapt to using. The main gateways include auditory, visual, tactile, and kinesthetic. Rigor's model of mind styles, elaborated by Butler 1986, groups learners according to concrete versus abstract and random versus sequential styles. First is the concrete sequential learners prefer direct hands-on experiences presented in a logical order. Example are the workbooks, program instruction, demonstration, structured laboratory approaches. Next is the concrete random learners lean toward a trial and error approach. Examples are the games, simulations, independent study approach, and discovery learning. Next will be abstract sequential learners, decode meaning, verbal, and symbolic messages at the play. Examples are the reading, comprehension, listening to presentation. And abstract random learners are distinguished by their capacity to draw meaning. Example are the group discussion, lecture with question and answer portion, videotapes, or television. Next, letter B, information processing habits. This category included a range of variables related to how individuals tend to approach the cognitive processing of information. Letter C, motivational factors. Motivation is an internal state that leads people to choose to work toward or against certain goals and experience. Motivators can be categorized as either intrinsic and extrinsic motivators. Intrinsic motivators are generated by aspect of experience of task itself. The extrinsic motivators are generated by factors not directly related to experience or task. A helpful approach to describe students' motivation is Keller's 1987, who describes four essential aspects of motivation. So first, attention refers to whether students perceive the instructions as interesting and worthy of their consideration. Second, relevance refer to whether the students perceive the instruction as meeting some personal need or goal. Third, confidence refer to whether students expect to succeed on their own efforts. The last, satisfaction, refers to the intrinsic and extrinsic reward students receive from their instruction. Letter D, psychological factors. Factors related to gender differences, health, and environmental conditions are among the most obvious influences of the effectiveness of learning. Dan and Dan 1992 have developed standardized instruments to measure the learning styles and environment preferences of learners to cover these and other psychological factors. Teachers who have prescribed individual learning programs based on analysis of these factors feel that they have practical value in improving academic achievement, attitude, and discipline. So let's proceed to the second step of Assure model, which is the stated objectives. After the analysis of the learner's attributes, the teachers must state standards and objectives for the learning module. The stated objectives are statements describing what the learner will do as a result of instruction. In other words, objectives are the learning outcomes. That is, what will the student will learn from this lesson. In order to develop proper objectives, you must frame them in terms of desired behavior. The objectives you use should be as specific as possible so the learner understands what they are to accomplish. If objectives are clearly and specifically stated, both the learning and teaching will become objective-oriented. This statement will focus on what the learners will know or be able to do as a result of the instruction. An example of this is with the medical students. The learners will be able to name at least two databases and two search techniques that they can use to locate medical evidence for particular cases. So the objectives can be used in assessing the success of the students, perhaps for the grading process. Also, you can use to let the learners know what they will accomplish through the class. Why you should state instructional objectives. You must know your objectives in order to make appropriate selection of methods and media. Your objectives will in sense guide your sequence of learning activities and your choice of media. Knowing your objectives will also commit you to create a learning environment in which the objectives can be reached and to help ensure proper evaluation. Objectives should be stated in terms of what the learners or the audience will be able to do as a result of instruction. The conditions under which the student or trainee is going to perform and the degree of acceptable performance should be included. The next step is to state the objectives as specifically as possible. Last, the objectives may be derived from a needs assessment or a course syllabus stated in a textbook, taken from a curriculum guide or developed by the instructor. So, the ABCD of well-stated objectives. A well-stated objectives start by naming the audience of learners for whom the objective is intended. Second, and if then specifies the behavior of capability to be learned and the condition under which the capability would be observed. Specify the degree to which the new skill. The ABCDs, first is the audience. The letter A, learning will take place when the learners are active, mentally processing an idea or physically practicing a skill. For whom is the objective intended? Focus on what the learning is doing, not on what the teacher is doing. Learning is most likely to take place when the learner is active, mentally processing an idea or physically practicing a skill, not what the teacher does. The objective begins by stating whose capability is going to be changed. Next will be the letter B, stands for behavior, describing the new capabilities that the audience will have after the instruction. What is the behavior or performance to be demonstrated? The heart of the objectives is the verb describing the new capability that the audience will have after instruction. This verb is most likely communicate your intent clearly if it is stated as an observable behavior. What will the learner be able to do after completing instructions? And vague terms such as know, understand, and appreciate do not communicate your aim clearly. Better are defined, categorize, and demonstrate, which denote observable performance. Third is the letter C, stands for conditions. The performance that is observed by the learners. What are the conditions under which the behavior or performance will be observed? A statement of objectives should include the conditions under which performance is to be observed, if such conditions are relevant. So last, the letter D, degree. The standard by which acceptable performance will be judged. To what degree will the knowledge or skill be mastered? The final requirement of a well-stated objectives is to indicate the standard by which acceptable performance will be judged, includes what degree of accuracy or proficiency must the learner display, whether the criteria are stated in qualitative or quantitative terms.
Select method, media, and materials. A systematic plan using media and technology certainly demands that the method, media, and materials be selected systematically in the first place. The selection process has 3 steps. First is deciding the appropriate method for the given learning task. Second is choosing media format that is suitable for carrying out the method. And the third is selecting, modifying, or designing a specific material within the media format. Choosing a method. In given lesson will probably incorporate 2 or more methods to serve different purposes at the different points in the progression of the lesson. There are 4 different types of teaching method. First is teacher-centered methods. Second is learner-centered methods. The third is content-focused methods. Lastly, the interactive and participative methods. And I choose the content-focused method. In this category of method, both teacher and learner, dito napapakita o mapapalawak kung ano yung ituturo ng isang teacher gamit ang method na to. Mas malinaw at mas maintindihan nito ng mga estudyante or learners. And kung madalas pa itong gamitin or i-apply ng teacher sa isang lesson, hindi pa mahihirapan ng student or learners kung paano intindihin kung ano ang content ng lesson or yung discussions. Choosing specific materials. The physical form in which a message is incorporated and displayed. Still, image, text, voice, music, etc. Types of media format. Real object, printed text, such as handouts, books, and computer screen. Chalkboard or whiteboard. Overhead transparency, slides, video such as tape, disc, television. Graphic such as photos, charts, and diagram. Audio such as tape or CD. And computer software. Obtaining specific materials. Selecting available materials. Modifying existing materials. Designing new materials. Selecting available materials, the majority of instructional materials used by teachers and trainees are off the shelf. That is ready-made and available from school, district or company collections or other easily accessible resources. Modifying existing materials. If you cannot locate entirely suitable materials and media off the shelf, you might be able to modify what is available. This be both challenging and creative. Designing new materials. It is easier and less costly to use available materials with or without modifying than to start from scratch. There is a seldom justification for reinventing the wheel. However, there may be time when your only resources is to design your own materials, as in the case with the selecting from available materials. You must consider certain basic elements when designing new materials. Utilize media and materials. Use of media and materials by students and teachers. Preview the materials. Always preview instruction materials before using them. Materials should be appropriate for your audience and objectives. The teacher previews all the websites under the resource section of the student web quest. Also, the student produces PowerPoint presentation, videos, play scripts, and audio materials before allowing them to present before the class. Prepare the materials. Gather all the equipment you and the students will need and determine the sequence. The teacher prepares students' WebQuest page, handouts, and rubrics using MS Word software. The students make sure that the necessary equipment is working and accessible for the students to use. Prepare the environment. Arrange the facilitate for proper students' use of the material and media. The classroom will always set up for small teamwork. Prepare the learners. Give a broad overview of the content lesson or tell how the lesson relates to the topic being studied or give a motivating statement that creates a need to know by telling learners how they will profit from the lesson. Give cues directing attention to specific aspects of the lesson. To prepare the students, the teacher presents the overall plan and objectives for the lesson. The teacher also reminds the students about plagiarism, copyright issues, and citing resources, making reference to available web links.
So now let us move on to the step number 5, which is to require learners' participation. So it is being said by John Dewey from the 1990 that active participation in learning will enhance learning activities. Now let us dig deeper into this fifth step. And okay, so it is being said that requiring learners' participation requires that you should make plans on how you are going to actively engage your students in the material that you are teaching. So this needs to be figured out both at the class level and the individual level. So whenever we, as future teachers, whenever we make our lesson plans, we should always make sure that we use activities that could able to engage our students to whatever lesson that we are teaching. We must be able to help them to engage themselves, and of course, we must able to assess by its class level or the whole class, and of course we should not forget the individual level. So there are requirements of being or having an effective teaching. So the number one is the active mental health involvement. So of course, when you are able to involve your students' mental abilities, then you are one step closer to have in having an effective teaching. The second one is the activities should allow students to apply new knowledge, abilities, or feedback. Of course, when we are using such activities, we should always keep in mind that students should be able to apply to whatever situation those knowledge that they have acquired from your lessons. So and of course, they were able to use their abilities to apply whatever abilities that they have for themselves. And also, they could provide feedback to whatever learning activities or lessons that you have taught from them. And the last requirement in effective teaching is the involvement of students' independency. It you must use or it must have computer assisted teaching, internet activities, or group work. So we our education era is now on its student centered. So as future teachers, we are always reminded that our classroom should always be student centered, and by this we are featuring the independence of our students, and of course we are also using technology to aid our teaching materials. We used computers, we used phones, and of course the internet, which is very much reliable when it comes to having activities, and of course the collaboration of the whole group. Now let us move on to our sixth and final step, which is to evaluate and revise. So if this is evaluating the impact of your teaching on your students. So how we are able to evaluate if our students learned something from us or not. So this also includes an evaluation of your teaching strategies like the technology, the media, and the materials that you have used. So you are through this step, you are evaluating how effective you are or ineffective you are to your students. So there are several assessment that you could do to evaluate a learner's achievement. So here are the following authentic assessments that we could use. So these are the following tasks. Number one, they could have or write more than one correct paragraph. Number two, this should be thought-provoking and not simply requiring recalculated products. Another is to require decision-making rather than just remote memorization. Next is to develop thinking in a variety of ways. Another is to lead to other problems to be solved, and the next one is to raise other questions. So there are also types of authentic assessment that includes um, to in evaluating our students' learning. So here are the following assessment that we could use. So the number one is through student projects. So when we have student projects, this includes the writing, the assessment, which have their performances, such as giving speeches or demonstrations. So through this assessment, we could able to assess what uh, if our students learned something or they have acquired a certain knowledge from us. Okay, and another is the oral questioning by both teachers and their student. So this is very much um, often used because uh, uh, usually teachers ask questions in order to know if a student know it or already have acquired the lesson. So these are done by both teachers and students. The teachers could ask question and the student will answer, and also student could ask question and the teacher could answer. Another is the discussion of controversial topics and current products or current events. So when we talk about controversial topics and um, having discussions about current events, then our students could apply whatever situational problem or situational context they're learning. So they could transfer whatever knowledge that they have acquired and apply it to the context that they are currently facing. So the last one is the portfolios, which are very much useful. So this includes the students' work with summaries and reflections. So in portfolios, we usually have the following evaluating task that is being compiled inside it. So there are also questions that are very much useful to ask during evaluation. So this could help us a lot as future teachers, and of course when we are having our lesson plan making. So number one, the question is, did your lesson meet the learning objectives that you planned? How will you determine whether the students reach the objectives? Is your way of assessing the students in line with your learning objectives? So that's it. Another question that you can use is that, can this lesson be improved? How? How are you going to assess the weakness in your presentation? It's very much effective. Another is was your choice of media and materials a good one? How will you assess the effectiveness of these tools? Another is it possible that the other technologies, media, and materials would have done a better job? So those are the following questions that we could use or we could ask during our evaluation. So now let's have the final step in evaluation. So another question through the overall evaluation of your lesson plan and your teaching strategies. So was their experience or positive experience overall? Do they feel that they have reached your objectives and their own personal objectives? And the last one is, how will you determine whether your performance was effective? Now, let's have the revise or the revision. So, there are also certain questions here stated here in our presentation. So it says that, do students reach the goal? Did the media materials assist the learners in reaching those objectives? And could all the learners use the materials properly? So if there are discrepancies in these following questions between what you intended and what happened during the lesson, then this is the point that you could make a revision and exchange it with an appropriate one that uh, is more suitable, and it could make your lesson plan better. So that's it for our discussion. So we hope and pray that you have learned something from us. So thank you very much. Here is our references. So Thank you very much once again. Good day and keep safe always.